Thank you for staying with us. As promised, we have our guest, George Ogubi, who is a lawyer who is an advocate of the High Court, will be speaking to us regarding matters of data protection and voter registration. Thank you, George, for joining us. Now, let's start with first explaining to our viewers what data protection and safety means. What exactly does also data breach mean? What do these terms mean?
Thank you very much, Grace, for having me tonight. Allow me first to commend the Kenyan government for the efforts it took for them to have a Data Protection Act since the enactment of the 2010 Constitution. You realize that in 2019, the president assented into law the Data Protection Act. So when it comes to issues around data protection, you will not avoid to mention privacy. This right called right to privacy. It means that a data subject, and when I talk about a data subject, I am talking about people who give their data to institutions, and even institutions which give their data. So I'm talking about people who give their data to either data controllers and data processors. So when we talk about data protection, it goes hand in hand with the right to privacy, such that if I give my data for a particular use by a certain individual or an institution, we are saying that at the same time, the data needs to be protected. I need, as a data subject, I need to enjoy that right of privacy, so that information that I give out of my own free will is not shared to third parties or is not used for commercial purposes. So that is what we mean when we talk about data protection.
Now, thank you. Before I move to the next question, if you can also tell us whether you think the Data Protection Act of 2019 has been fully implemented. What are your thoughts on whether it's been fully implemented?
Thank you very much, Grace, again for that question. And I'm actually picking issues with the implementation, because if you look at the Act itself, and if you look at the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner, you will realize that this Act, since it was enacted in 2019, it has not been realized fully. It has not been implemented fully. We are currently still waiting for regulations, and that is why my worry is that we are going into an election without full implementation of the Data Protection Act, notwithstanding the fact that we have an Office of the Data Protection Commissioner, which if you walk around and ask many Kenyans, of course, before the act was passed, they will tell you that public participation was done. But how many know of the existence of that office, the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner? How many know even where it is located? And how many even know who are the commissioners that sit in that office? So it is very sad, and we can clearly conclude that we are still very far from implementing the Data Protection Act so that it can achieve its objectives.
It's good that you've mentioned that. So maybe you can explain to our viewers what it exactly means to go to the elections. We're looking at less than a year to the general elections, with the IBC who launched mass voter registration on Monday. What exactly are the dangers of going into an election without a fully implemented Data Protection Act?
One of the dangers that we are looking at before we get into elections, of course, we are talking about issues of data leakages. We are talking about issues of trade-offs. We are talking about serious manipulation and violation of the right to privacy in regards to data for the voters, because you realize that voters are registering biometrically, and therefore means this is data that is available digitally. And of course, if we do not have, yes, we have an act, but if we do not have the regulations before Kenya goes into an election, then how will we enforce issues of accountability? How will this country be able to enforce issues where personal data is leaked? You will realize that, of course, in 2013 and in 2017, when Kenya was going for the general elections, we had serious violation of personal data. Personal data belonging to Kenyans was shared to foreign companies. And of course, we saw a lot of mentioning of Cambridge Analytica, where data belonging to Kenyans was shared to them. And it is that data that was used to manipulate, of course, the elections during that time in 2013 and 2017. So we face a serious danger should we not enact the regulations before Kenya goes into the election come next year in August.
Thank you for that. Now, the Data Protection Act of 2019 was allowed to conduct investigation on its own initiative or on the basis of a complaint. However, it emerges that the commission is under the Ministry of ICT. Do you think this in any way undermines the way it conducts its duties?
Absolutely. When we talk of the Office of the Data Protection Commission, the Act itself says that it is supposed to be an independent commission. Why it fell under the Ministry of ICT still is a question. And I'm very happy that currently there's a matter in court, which I hope that at the conclusion of that matter, we are going to see that this commission will be able to become independent so that it can be able to conduct its activities without fear, of course, and of course without interference from any quarters, including government quarters. Because you realize this year, Kenyans woke up to the realization that they have been registered in one political party or the other. That was a serious violation of privacy. Data was shared. That means our data is not safe. Because if you can wake up and realize that your name has been mentioned in one political party or the other, then when complaints are made to the commission, you realize that up to now, no action has been taken. Yet there was a serious, gross violation of personal data belonging to Kenyans. So we face a very serious danger should this commission not become independent as the law envisages it to be independent. We also face a danger in that, of course, if it is not independent, then we will see serious interference by other arms of government. Yet, if we talk about data controllers and data processors, you will realize that government is the biggest controller of data, and government, again, is the biggest data processors. So if this commission is not given its full mandate as required by the law, then we face a serious harm in regards to the objectives and the workings and the functions of the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner.
It's important that you mentioned that. Do you think Kenyans have a reason to worry of such a repeat of what you just mentioned regarding Kenyans waking up and finding themselves registered in different political parties? Do Kenyans have a reason to worry?
Indeed, Kenyans have got a reason to worry, Grace, because a perfect example that I would give, a clear-cut example in where Kenyans expressed their worry was during the registration of Huduma numbers. You could see Kenyans asking, why are we registering? What is this Huduma number meant to serve? Because when you are collecting as a data controller, when you read the act, as a data controller and a data processor, one of the requirements and which you must meet is that you must tell a data subject why you are collecting that information, how that information is going to be used, and for what purpose are they collecting that data from you. And so there was a big worry in terms of during the registration process of the Huduma number. And there was a case actually by the Nubian community, and which they emerged successful, because then they were asking, if the government does not have clear regulations, if the government does not have a clear laws to come and govern data collection, data processing, and data storage, then there is no need for us to continue registering for the Huduma number. So indeed, before we go to the elections, Kenyans should be worried that what is their data going to be used for? Is their data, personal data, going to be used to manipulate elections? Is their data going to be used for commercial purposes? That is something that should worry Kenyans if these regulations that are supposed to enforce the Data Protection Act are not put in force.
Thank you for that. Now, George, if you could also paint a picture for our viewers on what it will look like if the Data Protection Act was fully implemented before we went for elections in 2022.
Thank you very much, Grace, for that question again. Should the Data Protection Act be fully implemented before Kenyans go to the election? One of the things that it will do is that Kenyans will have full confidence in the elections and the data that they gave out to the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. Because if they are assured that their personal data is going to be held private, is going to be protected, then indeed Kenyans, even during this period, if that assurance can be given to Kenyans that their personal data is going to be protected fully before Kenya goes into the next election, then you will see many Kenyans coming out to register as new voters. You will see Kenyans having confidence in the electoral process because the other day you had the chair for IEBC talk about cleaning the data. When you talk about cleaning, perhaps he was referring to verifying the data that they have collected, of course, without issues of making these data available. Because when you talk about data privacy and data protection, you also bring about other concepts. Because Kenyans wouldn't want to go into an election knowing that either they were manipulated to vote in a certain way, or perhaps their data was used to spread propaganda so that, of course, they vote in a particular direction or for a particular person or in a particular manner, as was witnessed, of course, in the 2013 and the 2017 elections.
Maybe lastly, you could also give us your final remarks regarding the matter of data protection, even as elections are continuing to register for voting.
Thank you very much, Grace. My final remarks would be that it is very sad that as Kenyans, and of course as human beings in general, we have to wait for a law to be passed or for a regulation to be passed for us to realize this right to privacy. It is so unfortunate. You go in other jurisdictions, you'll realize that sometimes you don't even need a regulation. You don't even need an act to realize that the right to privacy has to be achieved. And of course, others will talk about limitations. Others will talk about, yes, you have a right, but this right has to be limited. But when you talk about limitation of the right to privacy, then I will present to you that you must meet the three-part test. There's a three-part test when you want to limit a right. And parting short, those limitations are that, one, that limitation must be provided in law. Number two, that limitation must be for a legitimate purpose. And number three, is that limitation necessary? So I would urge Kenyans to come out and perhaps demand from the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission and of course the government in general to give them an assurance that indeed, even as they register as voters, their data is protected and they will enjoy in full their right to privacy.
Thank you for that. I'm sure viewers have got something to think about regarding data safety and data protection. Many thanks to you, George, for joining us for this interview.